The Afghan mountains stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, their jagged peaks casting long shadows across the valley below. Commander Jake Morrison adjusted his tactical gear as his SEAL team prepared for what intelligence had described as a routine reconnaissance mission. The Taliban had been moving weapons through this corridor for weeks, and tonight they would finally put a stop to it. Morrison had led dozens of operations in these unforgiving mountains. At 34, he was considered one of the Navy's finest, with a reputation for bringing his men home alive. His team respected him not just for his tactical brilliance, but for the way he treated every mission with the gravity it deserved. Tonight felt different, though. The intelligence reports were sparse, almost deliberately vague. "Sir, we've got movement on the ridge line," whispered Petty Officer Rodriguez through the comm system. The team had been in position for 3 hours, watching the narrow mountain pass where the weapons convoy was supposed to appear. The sun had set an hour ago, and the temperature was dropping fast. Morrison raised his night vision scope and scanned the area Rodriguez had indicated. Nothing seemed out of place, but something nagged at him. In his years of service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming that something was wrong. The convoy appeared exactly as intelligence had predicted. 3 vehicles moving slowly through the pass, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Morrison signaled his team to prepare for engagement. They had practiced this scenario countless times. Take out the lead vehicle, secure the weapons, capture any high-value targets, and extract before enemy reinforcements could arrive. As Morrison prepared to give the order to engage, the world around him exploded into chaos. The lead vehicle erupted in a ball of flame, then the second, and finally the third. The precision was surgical. Each shot placed exactly where it would cause maximum damage, while ensuring no survivors could escape to warn others. What the hell just happened? Rodriguez's voice crackled through the comm system, confusion evident in his tone. Morrison was equally baffled. His team hadn't fired a single shot, yet the entire convoy had been eliminated in less than 30 seconds. Someone else was out there, someone with extraordinary skill and equipment that matched or exceeded their own. "Sir, I'm picking up a heat signature on the opposite ridge," reported Sergeant Williams, the team's designated marksman. Approximately 800 meters out, moving fast, Morrison swung his scope toward the location Williams had indicated. For just a moment, he caught a glimpse of a figure moving with fluid grace across terrain that should have been nearly impossible to navigate in the dark. Whoever was moved like a ghost, appearing and disappearing among the rocks with an expertise that made even his elite team look clumsy by comparison. "Should we pursue?" Rodriguez asked, already knowing what the answer would be. Morrison considered their options. Their mission parameters were clear: observe and report on Taliban weapons movements. The weapons had been destroyed, which accomplished their objective, but the presence of an unknown sniper complicated everything. Was it a friendly force they hadn't been briefed about? A competing faction within the Taliban? Or something else entirely? Negative, Morrison finally responded. "We maintain position and observe. If this is a friendly asset, we don't want to compromise their operation. If it's hostile, we need to understand what we're dealing with before we engage." The team settled into their observation posts, but Morrison found it impossible to concentrate on their original mission. His mind kept returning to that brief glimpse of movement on the ridge. The precision of those shots had been extraordinary, but it was more than just marksmanship. The tactical awareness required to position oneself perfectly for a 3-vehicle engagement, the timing to eliminate all targets before they could respond, and the ability to extract immediately afterwards spoke to a level of training that very few people in the world possessed. Hours passed in tense silence. The team monitored radio frequencies, searching for any indication of who might have been responsible for the attack. Taliban communications were frantic, with various commanders trying to understand what had happened to their convoy. But there was something else in their chatter, a note of fear that Morrison had rarely heard from these battle-hardened fighters. "They're talking about a ghost," Williams reported, listening to the intercepted communications. "Something about a shadow that strikes without warning and disappears without a trace. This isn't the first time, sir. Sounds like this has been happening for weeks. Morrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. If someone had been operating in this area for weeks without any intelligence agencies being aware of it, they were dealing with a professional of the highest caliber. The question was whether this professional was on their side or working for someone else entirely. As dawn approached, Morrison made the decision to investigate the position where they had spotted the sniper. Against standard protocol, he led a small team across the valley to examine the site. What they found there would haunt him for years to come. The position had been chosen with mathematical precision. From this single location, the sniper had clear lines of sight to 3 different points along the mountain pass, allowing for the sequential engagement they had witnessed. But it was the evidence left behind that truly impressed Morrison. 3 spent cartridges lay arranged in a perfect triangle, as if deliberately placed for someone to find. The brass was clean, with no fingerprints or identifying marks. More interesting were the small modifications to the position itself. Rocks had been carefully arranged to create a natural rest for a rifle, while other stones had been positioned to eliminate any chance of muzzle flash being visible from below. "Sir, you need to see this," Rodriguez called from a few meters away. He was kneeling beside what appeared to be a small cairn of stones. Hidden beneath the top stone was a single playing card, the Queen of Spades. Morrison studied the card carefully. It was clean, new, and completely out of place in this remote mountain location. Someone had left it deliberately, but what did it mean? Was it a signature, a message, or simply psychological warfare designed to unnerve anyone who discovered the position? The team spent another hour searching the area, but found nothing else. Whoever had been here had covered their tracks with professional thoroughness. Even Morrison, with his years of training in tracking and counter-tracking, could find no indication of which direction the sniper had gone after completing the mission. As they prepared to return to base, Morrison noticed something that made his blood run cold. From this position, the sniper would have had a clear view of his team's observation post. They had been watched, evaluated, and potentially targeted for the entire night. The fact that they were still alive suggested either that the sniper considered them non-threatening or that eliminating them would have complicated their mission unnecessarily. Back at the base, Morrison struggled with how to report what they had witnessed. The official mission had been successful in that they had gathered intelligence on Taliban weapons movements. The fact that those weapons had been destroyed by an unknown third party was certainly relevant, but it raised questions that Morrison wasn't sure he was prepared to answer. Colonel Patterson, the base commander, listened to Morrison's report with growing concern. The presence of an unidentified sniper operating with such effectiveness in their area of operations created serious complications for ongoing missions. "What's your assessment, Commander?" Patterson asked after Morrison had finished his briefing. Morrison chose his words carefully. "Sir, we're dealing with someone with extensive military training, possibly special forces level. The equipment and tactics suggest significant resources behind this operation. Most importantly, they had multiple opportunities to engage our team, but chose not to. That suggests either friendly intent or a very disciplined professional who doesn't take unnecessary risks." Patterson nodded grimly. Intelligence has been receiving scattered reports of similar incidents throughout the region. Convoys destroyed with precision shooting, outposts eliminated without survivors, weapons caches blown up with surgical accuracy. If this is all the same person, we're looking at someone who's been systematically dismantling Taliban operations for months. The implications were staggering. A single sniper, operating apparently without support, had been conducting a one-person war against Taliban forces in one of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan. The level of skill required for such operations was extraordinary, but the psychological fortitude needed to sustain such a campaign was almost beyond comprehension. Morrison spent the next several days analyzing intelligence reports and trying to piece together a pattern from the various incidents. What emerged was a picture of someone with an intimate knowledge of Taliban operations, impeccable timing, and resources that suggested backing by a major intelligence organization. Yet no agency was claiming responsibility for the operations. The mystery deepened when Morrison received a classified briefing about similar incidents reported in other theaters of operation. Iraq, Syria, Yemen. Everywhere American and Allied forces were engaged against terrorist organizations, there were reports of precision eliminations that couldn't be attributed to official military operations. Sir, Rodriguez approached Morrison 3 days after their mountain encounter. We've got orders to return to the same area. Intelligence thinks there might be another convoy moving through tomorrow night. Morrison studied the mission briefing with mixed feelings. Part of him was eager for another chance to encounter the mysterious sniper, to perhaps solve the puzzle that had been consuming his thoughts. But another part of him was deeply concerned about taking his team back into a situation where they might be outmatched by an unknown adversary. As evening approached, and his team prepared for their second mission into the mountains, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something much larger than a simple reconnaissance operation. The Queen of Spades card sat in his pocket, a tangible reminder that they were operating in someone else's territory now. The helicopter lifted off into the sunset, carrying Morrison and his team back toward the mountains where questions waited in the shadows. None of them realized that their encounter 3 nights earlier had been carefully orchestrated, and that the real test was yet to come. In a small valley 30 kilometers from their destination, a figure in tactical gear methodically cleaned a precision rifle while studying satellite images on a ruggedized tablet. The images showed Morrison's team boarding their helicopter, and calculations were already being made about their likely insertion point and approach route. The Queen of Spades had served its purpose. Now it was time for the next phase of a plan that had been months in the making. The second insertion went smoothly, but Morrison felt the weight of unseen eyes from the moment his boots touched the rocky ground. His team moved with practiced silence through the familiar terrain, yet everything felt different now. They were no longer the apex predators in these mountains. Intelligence had been right about the convoy. 3 vehicles, same route, same timing as the previous week. But this time Morrison was ready. He had positioned his team differently, with overlapping fields of observation that would allow them to track any third-party interference. If the mysterious sniper appeared again, they would be ready. Movement on the North Ridge, Williams reported through the comm system. Single individual, moving fast. Morrison swung his scope toward the indicated position and immediately spotted the figure. Even in the darkness, it was clear that this person moved with extraordinary confidence across terrain that would challenge even his experienced team. But tonight, Morrison was prepared for more than just observation. Rodriguez, take Jenkins and circle around to the east approach. Williams, maintain overwatch on my position. We're going to try to make contact, Morrison whispered into his throat mic. The plan was risky, but necessary. If this sniper was a friendly asset, they needed to coordinate their operations to avoid future conflicts. If hostile, they needed to neutralize the threat before it could compromise ongoing missions. Either way, the uncertainty couldn't continue. Morrison moved carefully through the shadows, using every piece of cover available as he worked his way toward the sniper's position. His years of experience had taught him to read terrain like a map, to anticipate how an adversary would move and position themselves for optimal engagement. Tonight, that experience told him he was walking into a trap. The convoy appeared right on schedule, 3 vehicles moving slowly through the mountain pass. Morrison held his position, waiting to see what the sniper would do. For long minutes, nothing happened. The vehicles continued their journey unmolested, and Morrison began to wonder if their presence had somehow scared off their mysterious adversary. Then, the world turned upside down. The first indication something was wrong came from Rodriguez. Sir, we've got a problem. I'm seeing trip wires and what looks like shaped charges positioned along our extraction route. Before Morrison could respond, Williams' voice crackled through the comm system with barely controlled panic. Commander, we've got multiple snipers. I count at least 3 different positions, all with clear lines of sight on our team. Morrison's mind raced as he processed this information. They hadn't stumbled into a random encounter with a lone sniper. They had walked into a carefully planned ambush designed specifically for them. Someone had known they would return to this location and had prepared accordingly. All units maintain position and prepare for contact. Morrison ordered, his training taking over despite the shocking realization that they were severely outgunned. The convoy passed through the kill zone without incident, disappearing around a bend in the mountain pass. As the sound of their engines faded, an eerie silence settled over the mountains. Morrison found himself in the surreal position of commanding a special operations team that was simultaneously the hunter and the hunted. A new voice crackled through their communication system, transmitted on their secure frequency in flawless English with just the hint of an accent Morrison couldn't quite place. "Commander Morrison, your reputation precedes you. I suggest you and your team maintain your current positions while we have a conversation." The fact that someone knew his name and had access to their secure communications sent chills down Morrison's spine. This level of intelligence gathering suggested resources far beyond what any individual sniper should possess. "Identify yourself," Morrison responded, keeping his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Names aren't important right now, Commander. What matters is that you and your team are currently in a very precarious situation. You have 3 snipers with clear shots on your positions, and your extraction route has been compromised. However, I'm not interested in harming American soldiers who are fighting the same enemies I am." Morrison signaled his team to maintain their positions while he processed this information. The voice belonged to a woman, which surprised him more than it should have. In his years of service, he had worked with female soldiers and operators who were every bit as capable as their male counterparts, but something about the situation made the revelation unexpected. "What do you want?" Morrison asked directly. "I want you to understand that the operations you've been observing are part of a larger mission that your presence is complicating. The Taliban convoy you were supposed to intercept tonight was carrying more than weapons. They were transporting a high-value target who has been feeding information to terrorist networks throughout the region." Morrison's mind raced. Their intelligence briefing had mentioned nothing about a high-value target. Either their information was incomplete, or this woman had access to intelligence that his superiors didn't. "Where is this target now?" Morrison asked. "Currently secured and being prepared for transport to a location where he can be properly interrogated. Your mission parameters called for observation and reporting, correct? Consider this your report. The weapons have been intercepted, and a significant intelligence asset has been captured." Morrison found himself in an impossible situation. Standard protocol demanded that he verify any claims about captured high-value targets through proper channels. But the woman on the radio had demonstrated capabilities that suggested she might be operating with authorization levels far above his own. "I need proof," Morrison said finally. "Rodriguez, check your tablet. You should be receiving some interesting photographs right about now." Morrison watched as Rodriguez pulled out his ruggedized tablet and activated the secure communication system. Within seconds, his face went pale as he studied the images appearing on his screen. "Sir, these are photos of Kalinazir. Intelligence has been hunting this guy for 6 months. He's been coordinating attacks throughout the region." Morrison felt the ground shift beneath him metaphorically. Khalid Nazir was indeed a high-value target, someone whose capture would represent a significant intelligence coup. If this mysterious sniper had actually managed to capture him, it changed everything about their current situation. "How did you know we would be here tonight?" Morrison asked. "Commander, your predictability is both your strength and your weakness. You follow protocols precisely, which makes you an excellent leader, but also makes your movements easy to anticipate for someone with access to the right information." The implication was clear. Someone with access to classified mission planning had provided this information to the sniper. That suggested either a security breach within the military command structure or authorization for this operation at levels so high that Morrison's team wasn't supposed to know about it. "What happens now?" Morrison asked. "Now you complete your mission. You observe the convoy, confirm that the weapons threat has been neutralized, and report back to your superiors. In 3 hours, you'll receive confirmation through proper channels that Khala Nazir has been captured by friendly forces. Your mission will be considered a complete success. Morrison struggled with the ethical implications of what was being suggested. On one hand, if this operation was legitimate and authorized, then cooperating would serve the greater mission. On the other hand, if it wasn't authorized, he was potentially compromising his team and his mission by going along with it. I need assurance that my team will be allowed to extract safely, Morrison said. Commander, if I wanted to harm your team, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Your extraction route will be cleared within 30 minutes. I suggest you use the time to consider how you want to report tonight's events. William's voice came through the comm system with obvious relief. Sir, I'm no longer seeing the sniper positions. Looks like they've withdrawn. Morrison made a decision that would affect the rest of his career. All units, prepare for extraction. We're moving out in 30 minutes. As his team prepared to leave, Morrison found himself staring at the mountains around them, wondering if he had just participated in an authorized black operation or if he had been manipulated by someone with their own agenda. The Queen of Spades card in his pocket felt heavier than before. Rodriguez approached him as they prepared to move out. Sir, what do we put in the report? Morrison considered his options carefully. We report exactly what we observed. Convoy intercepted and destroyed by unknown forces. High-value target potentially captured. We let intelligence sort out the rest. The extraction went smoothly, almost too smoothly. As their helicopter lifted off from the mountain landing zone, Morrison caught a glimpse of a single figure standing on a distant ridge. Even at that distance, he could tell the person was watching their departure. Back at base, Morrison struggled with his report. The facts were straightforward enough, but the implications were staggering. Someone was conducting sophisticated military operations in their area of responsibility. Someone with access to classified information and resources that suggested government backing at the highest levels. Colonel Patterson read Morrison's report with growing concern. Within hours of its submission, Morrison found himself in a secure briefing room with visitors from Langley and the Pentagon. The questions they asked made it clear that his encounter in the mountains was part of something much larger than a single rogue sniper. Commander Morrison, said a woman in civilian clothes who had introduced herself only as Agent Carter, we need to know everything about your encounter. Every detail, no matter how insignificant it might seem. Morrison recounted the events carefully, watching the faces of his interrogators for any sign of recognition. When he mentioned the Queen of Spades card, several of them exchanged meaningful glances. The person you encountered, Carter continued, did she give you any indication of her nationality or organizational affiliation? Morrison shook his head. The accent was subtle, possibly European, but she spoke English like a native speaker. The tactical knowledge and equipment suggested military training at the Special Forces level. A man in uniform who had been introduced as General Harrison leaned forward. Commander, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. The person you encountered is someone we've been trying to identify for over 2 years. She's been conducting similar operations in multiple theaters, always with surgical precision, always disappearing without a trace. Morrison felt a chill of recognition. Sir, are you saying this is the same person responsible for all the incidents we've been tracking? That's exactly what we're saying, Harrison replied. And after tonight, she knows that we know about her. That changes everything about how we have to approach this situation. Carter pulled out a file and placed a photograph on the table in front of Morrison. It showed a woman in tactical gear, face partially obscured by night vision equipment, but clearly the same build and movement profile as the figure he had observed in the mountains. Her calling card is always the same, Carter explained. A playing card left at the engagement site. Always the Queen of Spades. We've found them in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, and 3 other locations we can't discuss. Each time, the tactical execution is flawless, and the intelligence value of her targets is extraordinary. Morrison studied the photograph carefully. Even with most of her face hidden, there was something compelling about the image, a sense of confidence and competence that radiated from her posture. "What do you need from me?" Morrison asked. General Harrison exchanged a look with Carter before responding. "Commander, we want you to make contact with her again. We believe she chose to reveal herself to you for a reason, and we need to understand what that reason is." Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of his career, but potentially the outcome of a shadow war being fought in the mountains of Afghanistan by someone whose identity and motives remained completely unknown. 2 weeks later, Morrison found himself back in the Afghan mountains, but this time his mission parameters were unlike anything he had ever received. Instead of hunting Taliban fighters or securing weapons caches, he was attempting to make contact with a ghost who had been systematically dismantling terrorist networks across multiple countries. The meeting location had been specified in the most unusual way possible. Morrison had discovered another Queen of Spades card tucked into his personal equipment bag, along with GPS coordinates and a time. How someone had gained access to his secured gear remained a mystery that made everyone from base security to intelligence officials deeply uncomfortable. Morrison approached the designated coordinates alone against the strong protests of his superiors and teammates. The location was a natural amphitheater formed by rock formations, providing excellent cover from observation while allowing for multiple escape routes. It was, Morrison realized, the perfect place for either a friendly meeting or an execution. She was waiting for him when he arrived. Even in full tactical gear, it was immediately apparent that this was the same person who had been conducting the precision strikes throughout the region. Her equipment was top-tier military hardware, but with modifications that suggested access to resources beyond what any standard military unit would possess. Her rifle was a work of art, customized for extreme accuracy with a scope that probably cost more than Morrison's annual salary. "Commander Morrison," she said as he approached, her voice the same one that had spoken to him through the radio weeks earlier. "Thank you for coming alone. That shows either considerable courage or considerable foolishness." "I'm hoping for courage," Morrison replied, stopping about 10 meters away from her position. "My superiors are very interested in having a conversation with you." She laughed, and the sound was surprisingly warm given the circumstances. "I'm sure they are. The question is whether I'm interested in having a conversation with them." Morrison studied her carefully. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical style and eyes that missed nothing. Her face showed the kind of weathering that came from years of exposure to harsh environments, but her movements were fluid and confident. Most notably, she wore no visible rank insignia or unit identification of any kind. "They want to know who you are," Morrison said directly. "I know exactly what they want to know, Commander. The question is what they're willing to offer in exchange for that information." Morrison had been briefed on several possible negotiation scenarios, but her directness caught him off guard. "What are you looking for?" She gestured for him to sit on a nearby rock formation, and, somewhat surprisingly, she sat as well, maintaining her rifle in a ready position, but not directly threatening. "Commander, let me ask you a question. In your years of service, how many times have you been ordered to conduct missions where the intelligence was incomplete, the authorization was questionable, and the political implications were more important than the tactical objectives?" Morrison considered his answer carefully. "More often than I would like." "Exactly. You're a soldier, Commander. You follow orders because that's what soldiers do. But what happens when the orders stop making sense? What happens when the people giving the orders are more concerned with covering their mistakes than accomplishing the mission?" Morrison began to understand where this conversation was heading. "Are you saying you went rogue?" "I'm saying I went independent," she corrected. "There's a difference. Rogue implies acting against your country's interests. Independent means acting in service of those interests when the official channels have become too compromised to be effective." She pulled out a tablet and showed Morrison a series of photographs. "These are the targets I've eliminated over the past 18 months. Kalanazir was number 47. Each one was a high-value target that official operations had either missed, couldn't reach, or were politically unable to pursue. Morrison scrolled through the images with growing amazement. The faces represented a who's who of international terrorism, people that intelligence agencies have been hunting for years. "How did you get authorization for these operations?" "I didn't," she said simply. "I created my own authorization based on intelligence that was being ignored or suppressed by people more concerned with political consequences than operational effectiveness." Morrison felt the ground shifting beneath him again. "So you're telling me you've been conducting unauthorized assassinations across multiple countries?" "I'm telling you I've been eliminating threats to American interests that the official system was unable or unwilling to address." The results speak for themselves. Terrorist attacks that never happened because their planners were eliminated. Weapon shipments that never reached their destinations. Intelligence networks that were dismantled before they could cause damage. Morrison struggled to process the implications of what she was telling him. If she was telling the truth, she had been conducting a one-woman war against international terrorism, operating without oversight or authorization from any government agency. "Why reveal yourself to me?" Morrison asked. "Because the situation is changing, Commander. The people I've been hunting are becoming aware that someone is systematically eliminating their leadership. They're adapting their tactics, increasing their security, and starting to hunt me in return. I need resources and support that I can't provide for myself." Morrison understood now why his superiors had been so interested in making contact with her. A skilled operator with her track record and intelligence access would be an invaluable asset if she could be brought under official control. "What kind of support are you looking for?" "Logistics, intelligence, extraction capabilities, and, most importantly, someone I can trust to have my back when things go wrong." Morrison looked at her carefully. "And you think that person is me?" "I think that person is your team, Commander. You've built a unit with exceptional capabilities and absolute loyalty to each other. That's exactly what I need for the next phase of my operations." Morrison felt a momentary surge of pride at her assessment of his team, but it was quickly replaced by concern about what she might be proposing. "What's the next phase?" She activated her tablet again and showed him a new set of photographs. "There's a conference happening in 2 weeks. The location is supposed to be secret, but I've managed to penetrate their communications network. 23 of the most wanted terrorists in the world will be in the same building at the same time." Morrison stared at the images with growing disbelief. "That's impossible. These people would never risk meeting in person. They're meeting because they're planning something that requires absolute coordination. Something big enough to risk exposing their entire leadership structure. I've been tracking communications for months, and whatever they're planning is scheduled to happen within the next month." Morrison studied the intelligence she was sharing with him. If it was genuine, it represented the intelligence coup of the decade. The elimination of so many high-value targets simultaneously would cripple terrorist networks worldwide. "What makes you think my team would be willing to participate in an unauthorized operation?" "Because your team consists of soldiers who understand that sometimes the mission is more important than the chain of command. Because you've all seen what happens when political considerations override tactical necessity. And because you know that stopping this conference could save thousands of innocent lives." Morrison found himself considering her proposal seriously, despite every regulation and protocol screaming at him that this was exactly the kind of situation that could end his career and land him in military prison. "Even if we wanted to help, we couldn't just disappear from our unit for an unauthorized mission. Commander, your next official mission is scheduled to take you to a location approximately 200 kilometers from where this conference will take place. A slight detour in your mission route, combined with some creative reporting, could provide the cover we need." Morrison realized she had been planning this conversation for weeks, possibly months. She had studied his team's mission schedules, analyzed their capabilities, and identified exactly how they could be integrated into her operations. "I need to know who you are," Morrison said finally. "If we're going to trust you with our lives and our careers, we need to understand who we're working with." She was quiet for a long moment, and Morrison could see her weighing her options carefully. Finally, She reached into one of her equipment pouches and pulled out a small leather case. Inside was a military identification card that made Morrison's blood run cold. The photograph showed the same woman, but younger, with shorter hair and wearing a dress blue uniform. The name on the card read Captain Sarah Chun, United States Army Special Forces. But what truly shocked Morrison was the date of death printed at the bottom of the card, 3 years earlier. Captain Chun was killed in action during a classified operation in Syria. She explained, watching Morrison's face carefully. Officially, her body was never recovered due to hostile fire and unstable conditions. Unofficially, Captain Chun decided that her death provided the perfect cover for operations that the living Sarah Chun could never have conducted. Morrison stared at the identification card, struggling to comprehend what she was telling him. You faked your own death. I was given the opportunity when a mission went wrong and my team was overrun. The official version says I died in the initial assault. The truth is that I was captured, held for 6 weeks, and eventually escaped after gathering intelligence about a network that my superiors refused to act on. Morrison began to understand the depth of her commitment to her mission. She had literally sacrificed her identity, her career, and her official existence to pursue targets that others were unwilling or unable to eliminate. When I returned with proof of what I had learned, I was told that the intelligence was too politically sensitive to act on. The networks I had identified were left intact because eliminating them might have diplomatic consequences. 6 months later, those same networks conducted attacks that killed over 300 civilians. Morrison felt a chill of recognition. He remembered news reports of attacks that had occurred around that time frame, attacks that had seemed to come from nowhere with no warning from intelligence agencies. That's when I realized that sometimes the only way to serve your country is to stop being an official representative of it. Sarah Chun died so that someone without rank or name could do what Captain Chun was prevented from doing. Morrison looked at the identification card again, then handed it back to her. What do you want me to call you? Most of the people hunting me call me the Queen. That's fine with me. Morrison made a decision that would define the rest of his military career and, quite possibly, his life. What do you need from my team? She smiled for the first time since their conversation had begun, and Morrison was struck by how it transformed her face. For just a moment, he could see the dedicated officer she had been before circumstances had forced her to become someone else. I need your team to help me eliminate 23 of the world's most dangerous terrorists in a single operation. I need you to trust me with plans that I can't fully explain until we're committed. And I need you to understand that if we're successful, none of you can ever take credit for what we accomplish. Morrison extended his hand to her. Captain Chun, you've got yourself a deal. She shook his hand firmly, and Morrison noticed that her grip was as strong as that of any soldier he had ever served with. Commander Morrison, I think this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership. As they prepared to leave the meeting site, Morrison realized that his career had just taken a turn that no amount of training could have prepared him for. He was about to lead his team into an unauthorized operation with a soldier who officially didn't exist against targets that his own government might not want eliminated. But as he looked at the intelligence she had shared and considered the lives that might be saved if their mission succeeded, Morrison knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes the greatest service to your country required stepping outside the boundaries of official service. The Queen had revealed her hand, and Commander Morrison was ready to play the game. In 2 weeks, they would discover whether their partnership could achieve what official channels had failed to accomplish, or whether they would all disappear into the same shadows that had hidden Sarah Chun's true mission for the past 3 years. As Morrison watched her disappear into the rocky terrain with the same ghost-like efficiency he had observed weeks earlier, he understood that it just enlisted in a war that most people would never know was being fought. The salute he gave to her retreating figure was one of respect for a soldier who had sacrificed everything in service of a mission that could never be officially acknowledged. The Queen of Spades had found her army, and the real war was about to begin.